Why being a servant in a medieval castle was a living nightmare. So you want to live in a castle, huh? Big stone towers, roaring fires, candle-lit feasts, gallant knights, maybe even a romantic tryst with a mysterious noble. Sounds magical, doesn't it? A medieval fairy tale waiting to unfold. But let me stop you right there. Because unless you were born with a title longer than your arm and land, stretching beyond the horizon, your role in that dreamy castle wouldn't be as a guest. It would be as a servant. And no, not the kind with cute aprons and polite bows. You'd be the human equivalent of a floor mop. So close your eyes. Now open them. Welcome to your new home. A damp stone cell beneath 100 feet of cold masonry. The good news? You're not dead. The bad news? You might wish you were by sundown. You awaken before the sun. There's no alarm clock. Just the bellowing of the cook or the slam of a wooden door echoing down the corridor. You sleep on straw, but calling it that is generous. It's a fermented blend of mold, mouse droppings, and whatever fell off your clothes the day before. The lice are part of the bedding now. They've made peace with the fleas. The rats scurrying across your chest are just passing through. There's no privacy, no quiet, and definitely no me time. You sleep fully clothed because it's freezing, and also because you only own one outfit, which hasn't seen water since the last rainstorm, that leaked through the ceiling. You rise with a groan and immediately regret it. Your back is stiff. Your feet are numb. You shuffle into the hallway, careful not to step on anything too wet or too warm. The smell hits you first, a cocktail of sweat, smoke, and rotting meat wafting up from the kitchens. You're in the servants' quarters, a warren of tiny rooms carved into the castle like afterthoughts. Light doesn't reach here. Air barely does. Mold grows on the walls, sometimes on your shoes, sometimes inside them. First task, fire. Always fire. You start in the great hall, hauling logs twice your size up from the cellars. Your arms shake. Your lungs burn. You're 19 years old, which in servant years means your joints are already a medieval disaster zone. You build the fire, coaxing flame from damp wood while the nobles still dream upstairs under fur blankets. If it's winter, your hands crack and bleed. If it's summer, you sweat through your clothes by sunrise. You still haven't eaten. Breakfast? Not for you. You prep it for them. You chop, boil, stir, sweat. Bread for the master. Porridge for the mistress. Roasted pigeons, salted fish, eggs, cheese. Everything the lordship desires. You might sneak a crust if no one's looking, but if they are, you're beaten. Or worse. One wrong move, and you're the entertainment at tonight's punishment. And the plates? You scrub them with sand, cold water, sometimes ashes. No gloves, no soap, just pain. Your uniform? A shapeless sack of wool held together by patches, prayers, and threadbare seams. Shoes? If you're lucky, worn leather bound with twine. If not, barefoot. Through snow, through manure, through centuries of bad decisions. There's no time to change, no time to rest. Your life is a sprint through an obstacle course of noble whims and terrifying consequences. You're invisible unless you make a mistake. Then suddenly, you're the star of the show, the bad kind. Public shaming, beatings, kitchen duty in the dungeon. Yes, that's real. The kitchen was often in the basement, filled with smoke, grease, fire, and despair. The castle might look majestic from outside, but inside it's a living furnace of chaos, hot where it should be cold, cold where it should be warm. Your job list is endless. Lighting candles, cleaning chamber pots, sweeping endless stone corridors, washing tapestries that weigh more than a horse, grooming dogs that eat better than you, fetching water from wells that feel like they lead straight to hell. Speaking of water, don't drink it unless you like the thrill of gambling with dysentery. And the chamber pots? Yes, you carry those. Everyone's waste, sloshing, splashing. A warm reminder that dignity is a myth. You dump it out, back, or, worse, down the garderobe chute. Those medieval indoor latrines that smell like a nightmare and sometimes overflow into the halls during heavy rain. You're the one who has to clean that up, while gagging, while crying, while being yelled at for not smiling enough. Laundry. Ha! The lords change clothes daily. You wash them in icy water, bent over a tub for hours, scrubbing stains with rocks. Your knuckles crack, your skin blisters. If the wind's wrong, your clothes freeze on the line. If it's raining, you get to wash it all again. But don't dry anything near the hearth. That's reserved for noble stockings and the master's doublet, both of which have to be dried. Just so. Misplace a stocking, say goodbye to your teeth. The smells are constant. Animal filth, human filth, spoiled meat, mildew, body odor, rotting straw. And when it's feast day, your worst nightmare. Nobles gorge themselves on roasted swans and honeyed figs while you scurry like an anxious ghost, refilling goblets, replacing trenchers, scraping bones off the floor, hoping none of them notice you. But they always do. Drunk nobles are dangerous. Some are cruel for sport. Others, worse. And you can't say no. You can't speak up. Your property with a pulse. Your decoration that bleeds. Night falls. You think maybe, just maybe, you'll get a moment to rest. Think again. The fires must be stoked. The dogs fed. The armor polished. The mistress wants her bath prepared. The bath, by the way, is a wooden barrel you fill with water you hauled by hand and heated over an open flame. It takes hours. She soaks. You wait. You empty it. The floor floods. You mop it up. You sleep for 2 hours. Maybe. Hygiene? A fantasy. You bathe once a season if you're lucky. Your hair is home to lice. Your skin peels from burns and boils. Your breath? Well, you haven't seen a toothbrush in your life. Your teeth are yellow, loose, painful. You chew on a stick when the rot gets too bad. There's no dentist, just pliers and screaming. If something festers, you pray. That's the treatment. If it doesn't kill you, you thank the saints and go back to scrubbing soot from the ceiling. Illness spreads like gossip. Coughs turn to fevers. Rashes turn to rot. But you don't stop working. You can't. If you die, you'll be replaced before your body cools. If you're too sick to serve, you're dead weight. You'll be dumped in a shallow grave. No marker, no name. Just part of the dirt now. And if there's a plague, the nobles flee. You stay. You clean up the bodies. You burn the infected linens. You risk your life daily for people who wouldn't remember your name if it were branded onto your forehead. Even religion offers little comfort. You pray because you're told to. You confess sins you didn't commit to avoid suspicion. You kneel until your legs cramp. You fast while the Lord feasts. And if the priest eyes you wrong, you're suddenly accused of blasphemy, or witchcraft, or theft. Doesn't matter. A servant's word is worth less than the mud caked to their souls. And women? Don't get me started. Being a male servant is agony. Being a female one is a sentence. You clean, you cook, you obey. And if anyone so much as thinks you looked at a noble the wrong way, you're whipped or worse. Assaults are ignored. Pregnancies get you thrown into the street. And if you complain, you vanish. Silence is survival. Every day bleeds into the next. Your dreams aren't of escape. They're of less pain, less humiliation. A night without screams or burns or rats chewing your toes. You grow old fast, or you don't grow old at all. Either way, when your end comes, it won't be noble. No legacy, no tomb, just a quiet disappearance beneath the stones you once scrubbed. So the next time you look at a castle and think, wow, I wish I lived there, remember this. You wouldn't be at the banquet. You'd be under the table, collecting bones. You wouldn't be sleeping in the tower. You'd be crawling through the latrines. You wouldn't survive a day as a servant in a medieval castle. Let me prove it. So you've always dreamed of living in a castle. Maybe as a gallant knight polishing his sword beneath fluttering banners, or a noble lady sipping wine on a velvet cushion while a bard plays sweet tunes by the fire. Maybe you pictured the roaring hearth, the feasts stretching into the night, the stone corridors echoing with whispers of courtly secrets. But there's one thing you forgot. You're not the lord. You're not the lady. You're not even the horse. You're a servant. And not just any servant. You're one rung above livestock, and one mistake away from public humiliation or worse. You weren't invited here. You were born into this, or sold, or traded, or given the opportunity to serve, which is medieval for welcome to indentured misery. You didn't get an offer letter. You didn't apply. You were property the moment you arrived. And once you're in the system, there's no way out. No promotions, no retirement, no career advancement. Just layers upon layers of filth, obedience, and bruises. Let's talk about that cursed pyramid they called a hierarchy. At the top, the chamberlains, elegant in appearance, sharp of tongue. These were the closest things to management among the servant class. They oversaw bedrooms, personal matters, and sometimes, if they were very, very trusted, the money. But don't get ideas. You'll never be a chamberlain. You don't even have shoes. Below them were the valets, ladies' maids, and grooms of the chamber. Personal attendants. Fancy word for glorified human coat rack. You dress your lord. You undress your lord. You wash their feet, brush their hair, scrub their undergarments, and pretend to not hear anything that happens behind the bed curtains. You are seen. You are not heard. And if they sneeze wrong and think you looked at them funny, you're out. Not out the door. Out the window. Next down the cursed pyramid. The grooms of the stool. Yes, the stool. The name is not metaphorical. It means what you think it means. Your entire job is to wipe the lord's noble posterior. You manage the royal toilet routine with dignity, detail, and a lot more eye contact than anyone wants. This job actually came with trust, access, sometimes even influence, because no one lies to the guy who holds the toilet paper equivalent. But again, you will never get this job, because you're below that. You're not trusted with the Lord's butt. You're trusted with his leftovers. Below them, the kitchen staff, not chefs. Chefs are artists. You're a kitchen boy, or a scullery maid, or the human spit turner. That means you sit beside a roasting fire for 12 straight hours, hand cranking a skewer of meat while your face boils and your clothes soak in fat and grease until your skin breaks out in open sores. You're the one who plucks the feathers from dead birds, scrapes blood off the tables, and scrubs pots so heavy they've broken stronger backs than yours. And beneath even that, the nameless, the dung haulers, the hallway scrubbers, the ones who empty chamber pots, chase rats from the pantry, or mop up after the noble hounds tear apart a deer in the entryway. They don't get called by name. They get called boy, girl, or you. They eat last. They sleep in corners. They are beaten when someone else is angry. They are you. You don't dream. You survive. Every task you perform is thankless. Every mistake is punished. You are wet when it rains, frozen when it's cold, drenched in sweat when it's hot. You get up before dawn and collapse long after the candles go out. And even when you do everything right, you're invisible. The castle doesn't care. It consumes you. The hierarchy is a lie. There is no ladder to climb, just a pile of aching bodies trying not to be the next one tossed in the ditch. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Not all servants were peasants. Some were noble-born. That's right. High-born children, often sent away at 7 or 8, became pages or attendants as a kind of training, a rite of passage. They learned to dress lords, serve food, polish armor, and bow without breaking eye contact. It was character building, said their parents. But that was the sugar-coated version, because they were still servants. They still scrubbed floors and cleaned boots, and got slapped for standing in the wrong hallway at the wrong time. They just wore nicer fabric while doing it. Then there were the peasants, your kind. Sold, borrowed, inherited, dragged into service as punishment, payment, or debt repayment. You didn't ask for this. You were fortunate enough to be born in the wrong village at the wrong time. The castle is your cage, and the noble family is the key holder. Try to leave, and you'll be hunted like a thief. Try to complain, and you'll be whipped like a criminal. Try to speak out, and you'll be silenced like a traitor. Your role becomes your identity. You don't exist outside your duties. You're not a person, you're a tool, a name on a chore list, a pair of hands, a silent mouth, a back that bends when ordered, a heart that beats just enough to carry the next bucket of slop upstairs without fainting. Forget about upward mobility. That phrase hasn't been invented yet, and even if it were, it wouldn't apply to you. You'll never marry into nobility. You'll never own land. You'll never eat at the high table. Your entire life is measured in service rendered and punishments avoided. You were born a servant, and unless the plague finds you first, you'll die one. So next time you imagine castle life, think again. Because unless you were lucky enough to be born in silk and baptized in gold, your dream isn't a fantasy. It's a medieval nightmare, and you're living it. Every waking, freezing, back-breaking second. Welcome to the pyramid. You're at the bottom. Try not to get crushed. So you still think castle life had its charm? Stone walls, fluttering banners, noble lords strolling through flower-filled courtyards, and maybe a servant or two bustling about with baskets of bread and pitchers of wine. Quaint, right? Cozy? Maybe even romantic. Let's drop the curtain and step into the backstage of that fantasy, right into the servant quarters. Not the ornate ones shown in films, but the damp, suffocating, vermin-infested pits where real castle servants spent every miserable second of their existence. Welcome to your new home. It's not a room. It's not even a corner. It's a space. Maybe beneath a staircase, beside the kitchen hearth, or if you're one of the unlucky ones, smack in the stables with the horses. If you're fortunate, and that word's doing a lot of heavy lifting, you might be sharing a stone room the size of a broom closet with 6 other people and a dog that doesn't belong to anyone but somehow always finds its way in to steal your heat. There are no beds. That's not an exaggeration. There are piles of straw, but not fresh, golden fairy tale straw. No, we're talking dark, damp, mildewed clumps of scratchy fibres mixed with bits of mud, mould, mouse droppings, and a delightful colony of fleas that throw nightly parties on your legs. The straw hasn't been changed since the last plague. You lie on it fully clothed, not just to protect yourself from the cold, but because there's nowhere to change. Privacy doesn't exist. There are no partitions, no curtains. If you're lucky, someone stacked crates around your corner to block the draft. But they also block the light and trap the smell. And oh, the smell. Imagine wet wool, rotten vegetables, spilled ale, mildew, horse sweat, human sweat, smoke, and the unmistakable perfume of unwashed flesh, all combining into a single olfactory assault that never fades. Only changes in flavour depending on who's throwing up or what's rotting in the corner this week. The floors are stone, always cold, always damp, and if it rained yesterday, probably still wet. And if it rained hard, the ceiling might have dripped all night, leaving puddles at your feet and soaking your already grimy blanket. Not that the blanket helps. It's a wool sheet stained with centuries of dirt, grease, and body fluids. You curl up in it out of desperation, but it offers about as much warmth as a damp sock. It's stiff, heavy, and smells like someone boiled it in soup made from rats and regret. Speaking of rats, they're everywhere. Bold, territorial, fearless. They scurry across your chest while you sleep. They nest in your shoes. They chew on your bread. You're not scared of them anymore. You're just annoyed. They've taken over the space like they're paying rent. And mold? It creeps across the walls like a living entity. Black, fuzzy, sometimes green. You wipe it away, it comes back. It stains your clothes, your bedding, your lungs. Coughing is constant. Everyone has the same rattle in their chest. You convince yourself it's nothing until someone dies from it. Then you move their body, take their blanket, and cough a little quieter. Bathing? Please. There's no basin, no soap, no time. You scrape your skin with a rag if you're feeling fancy, but most of the time, you go to bed in the same filth you worked in. Your clothes are stiff with grime, and your underlayers, if you even have any, are just extensions of your skin at this point. No one smells good. Ever. The nobles might douse themselves in rose water or cloves, but you? You smell like the inside of a butcher's sack left in the sun. And that's normal. That's accepted. That's survival. And when nature calls, and it always does, especially after that gruel that may or may not have had turnip rot in it, you don't go to a bathroom. That concept hasn't even been invented yet. You go to the garderobe, if the castle even has one. What's a garderobe? It's a glorified hole in the wall. You squat over a wooden seat that opens directly over the moat. Yes, the moat. The same one you were told not to fall into because of the beasts. Except the real beast is the cesspit below, full of decades of human waste, rotting food, dead animals, and whatever else the castle threw down that hole. The stench creeps back up the shaft and clings to the air like a curse. You hold your breath. You hope you don't drop your only rag. You hope you don't slip. You hope no one sees you because there's no door. Just a draught and shame. If the garderobe's full or frozen or just too disgusting, there's always the outhouse. A plank over a ditch out back. That is, if the pigs haven't already claimed it. Many servants simply relieve themselves in a corner of the courtyard after dark or into the nearest bucket. which you later carry outside and dump somewhere far enough that the master doesn't notice the smell, but close enough that you can get back before your break ends, which it never does, because breaks are a myth told by the lucky to torment the damned. And forget about latrines during winter. The water in the moat freezes, the holes freeze, the seat freezes, your rear end freezes. You come back with more than just a numb backside. You come back with a case of medieval frostbite and possibly a parasite or two. Your quarters, meanwhile, never warm up. The kitchen might be hot, but only if you're near the fire. The rest of the castle breathes ice. Stone walls don't insulate. They radiate misery. The windows are slits, unglazed, open to every gust of wind. Your breath fogs up in front of your face while you sleep. Your toes curl, then go stiff. You pray they're just numb, not dead. In summer, it's not better. The castle turns into a sweatbox. Air doesn't move. The stone absorbs heat and then bakes it into your skin. You wake up soaked, itchy, gasping. You try to open a window, but they don't open. They were never meant to. You strip off your clothes, but you're still boiling because you've got a rash from last week's laundry water, which had dead rat bits floating in it. Flies buzz everywhere. The walls sweat. The lice multiply. And you still have to get up. Serve, scrub, cook, carry, and somehow survive. This is not a home. This is a coffin with chores. You don't live here. You decay slowly. So if you still think castle life was romantic, consider this. Your room was never shown in the tapestries. Your stench was never sung about in ballads. Your pain was never written in the history books. But it was real. It was daily. And it was the unspoken foundation of every shimmering goblet and glittering feast held above your head. You lived below the nobility in every sense, in rank, in comfort, in dignity. You were the forgotten gear in the grand machine, and your reward for enduring it, waking up tomorrow and doing it all again, until your body breaks, or your will does, whichever comes first. It starts in the dark, before the sky even considers turning grey, before the roosters remember to crow, before the bells of the chapel groan into life and echo through the frozen stone corridors of the castle. But you are already awake. Or you'd better be. Because if you're not, someone will make sure you are. And not gently. There is no knocking, no whispered good mornings. Just a sharp bark from an overseer, the slam of a door or worse. A swift kick to your ribs from a boot laced by someone who sees you as less than a person. You don't stretch, you don't yawn, you don't roll over. You scramble upright, dizzy, aching, your limbs still frozen from the night cold. You reach for your shoes, if you have them, your threadbare blanket, if it wasn't stolen in the night, your dignity, which disappeared around the time you started scrubbing human filth from noble undergarments. You don't have time to think. You don't even have time to blink, because the day has already begun, and you're late. You haven't eaten, and you won't for hours. Maybe not at all, if the master's in a mood. Your first job is fire, because without it, nothing happens. No cooking, no washing, no light, no warmth. But the castle is made of stone, and fire hates stone. It fights you every step of the way. You carry logs heavier than your torso from a pile that's wet from last week's rain. You try to coax flames from damp straw, using a flint that's been worn down to the size of your thumbnail. Your fingers crack, your knuckles bleed, your hands shake. But still you strike, and strike, and strike, until the hearth finally coughs, smoke, and spits a tiny orange glow that you guard like your life depends on it. Because it does. Once the fire is going, you're sent to scrub the Great Hall. That's a generous name. It's a room the size of a barn, where nobles will dine later tonight. But right now it's covered in the grime of yesterday's feast. Bones, grease, ash, wine, vomit. You don't have a mop, you have a rag and a bucket of grey water, and your knees, which are already purple from years of crawling across flagstones, slick with filth. The smell is unbearable, a cocktail of sweat, urine, spoiled meat, and whatever died beneath the benches. But no one notices, because they're not the ones down here. Their boots don't slip on entrails. They're still asleep above you, in rooms you'll never see, beds you'll never touch, while you're scraping dried marrow off a platter with your fingernails. After that, it's chamber pots, all of them, dozens, collected from every corner of the castle, some nearly overflowing, some already spilled. Your job is to carry them one by one to the disposal pit or out to the moat, where the stench rises back up the shaft and clings to your face like a living thing. You gag, you dry heave, but you don't stop, because there's more, because there's always more. Laundry is next, the noble lady's gown, stained from wine, the knight's tunic, crusted with blood and sweat, the linens, stiff with weeks of filth. You haul them to the washing area, which is just a wooden tub in the courtyard filled with freezing water. You kneel over it, dunk the fabric, scrub with ashes. Your arms cramp, your back burns, your wrists swell. You hang the clothes over lines that sag under the weight of wet wool. You pray it doesn't rain and ruin everything you've done, because if it does, you'll do it again. No complaints, no questions, just pain and obedience. Then you help prepare the meals. Not for you, of course. You don't get to eat. These are for the nobles. A breakfast of fresh bread, hot pottage, thick slabs of meat, sweet fruit, and spiced wine. You haven't tasted any of it. You chop onions until your eyes blur. You stir stew until your fingers blister. You carry trays. You clean spills. You refill goblets. And once the nobles have finished, you clean again. Their leftovers would be a feast to you. But if you're caught sneaking even a crumb, it's punishment. A beating, or confinement, or worse. You go back to the kitchens, clean the pots, scrub the knives, wipe the soot from the walls. Then someone calls you, and you're sent to the stables to shovel dung, or to the gardens to pull weeds, or to the inner courtyard to polish armor, or to the tower to light torches, or to the pantry to count jars, or to the Lord's chamber to refill his basin, and not breathe too loudly while he sleeps. You are everywhere. You are nowhere. You are everyone's servant, and no one's priority. And when the sun sets, your day is not over. It simply shifts into a different kind of torment. Night duty. If you're assigned, you patrol the halls with a candle, trying not to fall asleep. Because if you do, and someone finds you, you might be thrown out, literally, out of the castle, into the freezing dark, where wolves and bandits and the cold will finish what exhaustion started. If you're lucky, you stay inside, but you still don't sleep. The lady might call for a bath, the child might need water, the steward might want to check the wine cellar, and send you down alone, with a torch and a warning that the rats bite. You might crawl into your straw pile for an hour at dawn, if there's time, if nothing else comes up. But you sleep in your clothes, with your boots on, curled around your own knees, praying your stomach doesn't growl too loudly, because someone might take that as insolence and punish you in the morning. You don't rest. You shut down, like a broken tool, because that's what you are, a tool, not a person, not a soul, just hands and feet and ears and silence. You don't have sick days. If you're sick, you work. If you're coughing, you work. If you've broken a toe, or burned your palm, or can't stop bleeding, you work. And if you can't, they replace you. Because there's always someone hungrier, someone more desperate, someone who'll take your job and your straw pile, and your name won't even be remembered. No one will write your story. No one will sing your songs. Because your life isn't meant to be remembered. It's meant to be used until it's over, and then erased. The nobles don't see you unless you spill something. The steward doesn't remember your name unless he's writing it on the punishment list. The cook doesn't ask how you are unless it's to shout that you're late. You live in silence. You move in fear. You breathe in smoke and sweat and dust. And your only reward is surviving to do it all again tomorrow, because there is no escape, no freedom, no mercy. The castle does not rest. It consumes. And you are fuel. Your life is a cycle, a loop, a trap. Wake, work, collapse, repeat, 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 until you die, or vanish, or finally fall. One step too slowly, one breath too loud, one moment too weak. And someone else steps over your body, picks up your bucket, and takes your place. Without a word, without a pause. The castle doesn't notice. The world doesn't care. And that is the life of a servant in a medieval castle. Let's talk about food. The thing that keeps you going. The thing that should bring comfort, joy, warmth, maybe even a sense of humanity. But if you're a servant in a medieval castle, food is not a blessing. It's a curse, a gamble, a daily ritual of silent dread. Because what you're eating isn't nutrition, it's punishment disguised as sustenance. It's not a meal. It's a test of how badly your stomach wants to survive another day. The nobles dine like gods. They sit at tables overflowing with roasted swans, glazed apples, honey-drenched tarts, fine cheeses, wheels of bread so soft they seem to breathe, spiced wines, steaming soups, gilded everything. While you, the one who cooked it, the one who carried it, the one who stood behind them, invisible while they gorged themselves on abundance. You are not even allowed a sniff. And when the feast is over, when the candles are guttering and the floors are slick with wine and grease, then maybe, just maybe, the leftovers come your way. Not in silver platters, not in bowls, but scraped into a bucket. A mash of meat bones, congealed fat, bread crusts, chewed edges, half-eaten bits that may have spent the last 4 hours sitting under the table or in someone's hand, or dropped on the rush-covered floor and picked back up by a dog. And if you're lucky, and fast, and no one else beats you to it, you might get a cold hunk of salted pork with a side of bread so tough it could break your teeth. And if it does, well, too bad. There's no dentist, just pliers and luck. The bread is days old, sometimes weeks, bulked up with sawdust or acorn flour or ground-up beans. Anything to stretch it, anything to make it weigh more, anything to trick the body into feeling full, even when your intestines are screaming for something green. But vegetables are rare, precious, seasonal luxuries, meant for the upper table. The noble garden is walled off like paradise. The herbs go to the lady's bath. The fruits are turned into wine and syrup and luxury tarts, while you get a grey ladle of pottage. Maybe, just maybe, a turnip that's more root than vegetable, floating in a bowl of water so thin you can see the bottom. And the bottom is just more misery. The gruel you're given is gloopy, oily, filled with unidentifiable flecks of something once alive. Maybe barley, maybe beetles, maybe both. It's cooked in the same pot every day, over a fire you had to light with your own bleeding hands, and it smells like wet hay mixed with smoke and disappointment. And if you're starving, which you are, you eat it fast before the rats do. And if there are worms, you pick them out or you don't. Either way, they're protein. But it gets worse during winter, during famine, during war. The food goes from disgusting to deadly. Rats disappear, not because there are fewer of them, but because they've been eaten. Dogs vanish. Chickens get stolen. Even the straw in your mattress starts to look edible. And when there is nothing left, truly nothing, that's when the bark goes in the pot. Boiled, scraped, chewed, not for flavour, because there is none, but because it makes your mouth stop screaming. And the rumours start. You've heard them. You've whispered them when the lights are low and someone hasn't come back from the fields. A child, a traveller, a thief. People go missing during famines, and the stew is thicker the next day. You don't ask questions. You don't want the answers. You drink your weak ale, not because you like it, not because it fills you, but because it's safer than the water. The water that runs brown with filth and death from the moat, the river, the same stream that caught the sewage from the garderobe, the same stream the pigs bathe in, and the stable boys piss in, and the fish die in. You drink beer instead. But it's not beer like you know it. Not strong, not satisfying. It's small beer, low in alcohol, low in taste. Just boiled water with a whisper of barley, brewed in vats that haven't been cleaned since the last plague, made by hands that still have dirt under the nails, because you made it. And you don't get to be clean. It's rationed like everything else, handed out in wooden cups, chipped and stained and bitter. But at least it won't kill you immediately, though sometimes even that's a lie, because bad beer is just as dangerous as bad water, especially when the barrels swell with mold or rot or something that used to be a rat and now isn't anymore. The point is, you never eat enough, and what you eat is never enough to keep you warm or strong or sane. Your belly is always tight, either from emptiness or from whatever cursed thing just went into it. You dream of apples. You dream of cheese. You dream of meat that hasn't turned green or bread that doesn't flake into sawdust when you bite it. And even then, even when your body is hollow and your bones are sharp beneath your skin and your head pounds from hunger, you still cook for them, still serve for them, still smile as you present a tray of glazed duck with rosemary and wild cherries, while your hands tremble and your stomach twists and your mouth waters and your heart withers, because you know you'll never taste it. Not once. Not ever. Food is not joy for you. Food is not ritual or celebration or culture. It is function. It is desperation. It is whatever is left, whatever is thrown, whatever can be scavenged and hidden and gulped down in secret before anyone sees you and accuses you of theft. And then it's the stocks, or the lash, or the kitchen fire, and no one will stop them. No one will care. Because servants aren't people. Not really. They're mouths to feed, only when necessary. and bodies to break, only when convenient. And you'll wake tomorrow, just as hungry, just as desperate, just as expendable. And it will all begin again. The same bucket, the same bowl, the same scraps, the same rot. Food in a medieval castle is not a right. Not for you, it's a privilege, and you are the last in line. Behind the nobles, behind the dogs, behind the rats, and if there's nothing left, you wait, and hope, and pray, or you starve. And that is how you live, if you're lucky. If you're not, you die. With your stomach full of mouldy bread and wormy pottage. And no one even notices until the next servant steps up to take your place at the cauldron. There is no misunderstanding in a medieval castle when it comes to who matters and who doesn't. You are not a person. You are not a name. You are not a soul. You are a servant. And servants are not born. They are owned. And once you enter the walls of that towering fortress of stone and smoke and cruelty, the rules are simple. Do everything you are told, exactly when you are told, how you are told, and with a bowed head, or you suffer. Not eventually, not symbolically, but immediately and physically. Punishment in a medieval castle is not a consequence. It is a strategy. It is management. It is discipline. It is control dressed in bruises and screams. It is the way the lord keeps order, the way the steward keeps silence, the way the lady of the house ensures no one dares to meet her eye. It is how they remind you, every second of every day, that you do not belong, that you are not safe, that you are not free. Because if you think being late by 5 minutes to stoke the fire is a mistake you can apologize for, think again. That's a beating across the back with the flat of a broom if you're lucky, with the buckle of a belt if you're not, and with a lash if the steward woke up angry. If you spill wine on a noble's sleeve in the middle of a feast, that's starvation for 2 days minimum, maybe 3. Maybe more, depending on how embarrassed they felt in front of their guests. You will still work through it. You will still scrub the blood from the flagstones on an empty stomach, while your fingers tremble and your knees buckle. And no one will ask if you're all right, because they already know you're not, and they do not care. If you speak out of turn, if you forget to bow, if your face looks even slightly annoyed when your name is shouted, that's the dungeon. Not the romantic, stone-walled mystery with candles and secrets, the real dungeon. A hole in the floor, a pit with no light, and no air, and no bedding, and no water. For hours, maybe for a day, maybe longer, with rats crawling over your legs, and your own breath turning into a wall of heat. Because there is no escape, there is no trial, there is no one to hear you scream. Because justice in a castle is a privilege, not a right, and you have neither. And if the lord has had a bad day, or a bad hunt, or a bad dream, and he walks past and decides your face offends him, that's it. You're punished, not because of what you did, but because he can. Because the law is his mood, the rule is his will, and your life is his to twist and break and discard as he pleases. There is no limit to what he can do to you. He owns your labor. He owns your bed. He owns your body. He owns your voice. And if you so much as look like you might disagree, that's insolence. And insolence can cost you teeth, fingers, your position, your life. And do not expect the other servants to help you. They won't. Not because they don't care, but because they can't. Because punishment is contagious. And if you speak up for someone else, if you protest, if you flinch too visibly, you might find yourself cleaning latrines with your bare hands for a month, or forced to sleep in the stables, where the horses kick and the fleas bite, and the floor freezes solid before the sun rises. If you're a woman and you catch the wrong kind of attention, you know better than to speak. If something happens to you, it's your fault for being there, your fault for being visible, your fault for being born. Punishment in the castle is not always visible. It's not always blood and bruises. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's isolation. Sometimes it's being denied food, or warmth, or light for days, until your thoughts unravel and your spirit cracks. And when you break, they tell you it was your fault, because you didn't pray hard enough, or because you didn't kneel fast enough, or because you forgot to say, "My Lord," with the right tremble in your voice. There is no mercy, because mercy implies you had dignity to begin with, and that is the first thing stripped from you when you become a servant. It goes before the name, before the title, before the role, before the chores, before the dirt. And once it's gone, they can do anything to you, and they will, because every time someone is punished, everyone else watches, and learns, and remembers, and obeys harder, and shakes deeper, and bows lower. Punishment is not the exception, it is the rule. It is how order is maintained. Not through respect, but through fear. The dungeon is not for criminals, it is for servants. The stocks are not for justice, they are for humiliation. The whip is not for correction, it is for spectacle. And when you hear the screams echo down the corridor, you do not run. You do not ask. You do not look. You lower your eyes. You keep your mouth shut. You scrub faster. You disappear, because the only safety in a castle is invisibility. And even that is temporary, because all it takes is one moment, one mistake, one sigh too loud, and suddenly you're the example, the lesson, the demonstration of power. And when you cry, they tell you to be grateful, because it could have been worse, and it can always be worse, because if you die, no one mourns you. If you collapse, no one lifts you. If you vanish, no one remembers you. You are a servant. And punishment is how they remind you that you always will be. If you were a woman, and you were a servant in a medieval castle, you didn't live. You endured. Every breath was a risk, every moment a trap, every glance a possible accusation or invitation or sentence. And every hour of every day was laced with the knowledge that your body was not yours, your life was not yours, your silence was your only shield. And even that could be torn from you in the blink of an eye or the flick of a noble's finger. Because being a female servant wasn't just hard, it wasn't just miserable, it wasn't just exhausting. It was a nightmare with no door and no light and no end. You were surrounded by men who saw you not as a person, but as a tool or a target, or both. The lord of the castle might summon you to his chamber, not to clean, not to serve, not to assist, but simply because he could, because he wanted to, because no one would stop him, because no one could. And if he touched you, if he ordered you to stay, if he forced himself onto you, there was no court, no trial, no law to protect you. Because rape wasn't considered a crime if it was committed by someone above your station. It wasn't called assault, it was called privilege. And if you resisted, you were punished. If you screamed, you were punished. If you told anyone, you were punished. Not just physically, but socially. Your reputation would be ruined. Your place in the servant quarters taken from you. Your tasks doubled. Your meals cut. Your name whispered behind hands until it vanished completely, replaced by labels like disobedient or impure or troublemaker. Because in a castle, your purity mattered more than your consent, and the moment it was taken from you, it became your fault. Always your fault. The guards were no better. Armed and bored and drunk with power, they roamed the corridors like wolves. And if you crossed their path alone, at the wrong hour, with the wrong expression, you might not return to your bed at all. And if you did, you came back quieter, colder, smaller. Because you learned fast that in a world built on hierarchy and silence, the safest thing you could do was disappear inside yourself. Say nothing. Hope they moved on. Hope they forgot you existed. But they didn't forget. Because once one man had taken what he wanted, the others would follow. Because now they knew you were vulnerable. And vulnerability in a servant meant availability. And you couldn't say no, because no didn't exist. Not for you. Not in a place where your entire existence depended on obedience and invisibility. And if, by some cruel twist of fate, you got pregnant, if your body carried the mark of your violation, it wasn't seen as a wound. It was seen as a stain. And you were the one punished. Not the man. Not the noble. Not the guard or the cook or the stable boy or the steward who cornered you behind the barrels. No. It was you. You were cast out, thrown into the cold with nothing. Not even your blanket, not even your shoes. And if you begged for mercy, for shelter, for food, they would laugh or turn away or call you a whore. And if you dared bring the child into the world, you did so alone, on the ground, with torn linen, and no help and no prayer and no hope. And sometimes the child survived, and sometimes it didn't. And sometimes you buried it behind the castle wall and cried until the wind stole your voice. And sometimes you didn't have the strength to bury anything. And sometimes you never made it that far. Because pregnancy was dangerous, even for noble women with midwives and warmth and medicine. But you had none of those. You had dirt and blood and fear and silence. And if you died giving birth, they'd say nothing. They'd move your body. They'd burn your clothes. They'd fill your bed with someone new. And life in the castle would go on, uninterrupted, unbothered, unchanged. Because that's what you were, a placeholder, a shadow, a background figure in someone else's story. If you survived long enough to grow old, and old meant 25 or 30 maybe, if you were lucky, you were used up, not respected, not honored, just used and forgotten. The new girls arrived, younger, thinner, more fearful, and you watched them disappear into the same dark hallway you once did. And you said nothing, not because you didn't care, but because you did. Because caring meant remembering, and remembering meant feeling, and feeling meant breaking, and you couldn't afford to break. Not here, not now, not ever. Because breaking made noise, and noise got noticed, and getting noticed got punished, and punishment was never fair, never clean, never swift. It was slow, it was cruel, it was public humiliation, stocks, lashes, exile, starvation, isolation. Work doubled until your spine cracked and your hands bled and your eyes stopped focusing. And even then, you kept going because the only alternative was worse. Some women ran, but where could you go? The roads were dangerous. The woods were filled with men who wanted the same things the castle men wanted, only with less hesitation and more violence. And even if you found a village, they would ask questions, and you had no answers, because you had no story, because your story was the one no one wanted to hear, or believe, or tell. Some women killed themselves, quietly, slowly, slipping into the moat, or swallowing something sharp, or stepping too close to the edge of the wall during a storm. But most women didn't. Most women stayed. Most women endured. Most women learned how to survive without living, how to smile without meaning, how to serve without being seen, how to endure abuse without protest, how to hide bruises under sleeves and terror behind stillness, because that was the only way to stay alive in a system built to crush them. The only way to avoid punishment was silence. The only way to avoid suspicion was submission. The only way to avoid disappearance was invisibility. And even that wasn't guaranteed. The castle was a cage, and for women, it was a cage inside a cage. A sentence passed at birth with no pardon and no appeal and no escape. And when people today speak of medieval castles with awe, when they walk through those stone halls and admire the tapestries and the chandeliers and the great halls, they do not see the women who suffered there. They do not hear the echoes of stifled sobs in the servants' quarters, or smell the fear that soaked into the floors. They see history, they see romance, they see power, but they do not see you, because you were never meant to be seen, not as a person, not as a victim, not as a survivor, just as a pair of hands, a bowed head, a silent mouth, and a name that was never written down, because in the end, being a servant in a medieval castle was not about labor, it was about ownership. And being a woman in that place meant your soul, your voice, your future were not your own, and never would be. Your back goes first, not in one dramatic crack, but in tiny daily betrayals. Each bend, each lift, each twist of your torso, carve in another notch of pain into your spine, until standing up straight feels like pulling on a rusted chain, and sitting down feels like giving up. But you don't sit, because sitting is a luxury, because sitting is seen as laziness, and laziness is punished. Your hands follow, roughened, raw, blistered from scrubbing stone floors and dragging firewood and plunging them into boiling pots and freezing buckets every hour of every day, until they are less hands and more tools, swollen, cracked, aching, with cuts that never heal, because there is no time and no balm, and no one cares. The joints swell, the knuckles split, and you wrap them in rags torn from the hem of your own tunic and carry on, because if you stop, someone else gets your spot, and you vanish. And no one even says your name again. Your knees are next, grinding bone on bone down uneven staircases, carrying sacks of flour heavier than your torso, hauling buckets of water up slippery towers, kneeling for hours before hearths that burn your face while your legs seize in place. And still you rise, and bow and serve and smile, because the castle doesn't wait for your body to recover. The castle doesn't wait at all. Your lungs betray you slowly, first with a cough, then a rattle, then a wheeze that won't go away, as the smoke from the kitchens, the soot from the hearths, the damp in the walls, and the mould in your straw bedding creep deeper into your chest and settle there like squatters, building a home of rot and phlegm. You try to work through it, but your breath shortens, your steps slow. and the steward notices. And then the other servants notice. And then, suddenly, you are a problem. And problems are removed. Skin infections blossom like mold in a cellar. Open sores from scrapes and bites and burns fester into angry wounds, leaking pus streaked with red. But there are no salves, no bandages, no ointments, just a filthy rag if you're lucky, and a muttered prayer if you're not. You press your hand to the wound and keep scrubbing. And if it spreads up your arm and blackens your fingers, you cut off the circulation with a bit of twine and hope it doesn't reach your heart. Because if it does, that's the end. But not a peaceful end. Not a noble end. It's a slow death, trembling in a straw pile while the others step over you and whisper that you're faking to avoid the day's work. Toothaches start as a dull throb behind the jaw, a pulse in the gum that flares every time you bite down on stale bread or chew the stringy meat left over from the noble's feast. But it doesn't go away. It grows until your face swells and your jaw feels like it's filled with fire, and you can't sleep or eat or speak without tears. But there is no dentist, no medicine, just the cook's old pair of blacksmith pliers and someone to hold you down, and a cloth to bite on if you're lucky. If you're not, the tooth stays, and the rot spreads until it eats into your bone, until your face is hot with fever, and your brain turns to fog, and the priest is called to whisper last rites, because the infection has reached your blood, and you are dying of something that could have been cured with a drop of penicillin, but doesn't exist yet. Death by infection is normal. No one gasps. No one mourns. They just drag your body away and sweep the floor and assign your duties to someone else, because the work must go on. And if you break your leg, or your ribs, or your spine, you don't go to a healer. There is no healer, only the village bone setter, who will tie your limb to a piece of wood and tell you to bite down and stop screaming while he twists it back into place. And if it heals wrong, you limp forever. And if it doesn't, you die of gangrene. And if you survive, you return to work, even with your body bent and your gait crooked and your hands trembling, because no one gets to stop. Not for pain, not for injury, not for anything. You are expected to work until your body gives out, and even then, for a little while longer, because your worth is not measured in health or happiness or comfort. It is measured in output, in obedience, in how much suffering you can absorb without collapsing. And even when you do collapse, you're not cared for. You are managed. You are cleaned away. You are replaced. Because the castle consumes labor. It chews through flesh. It breaks bodies, not out of malice, but as routine. Because it needs the fire lit, and the floor swept, and the lord's boots shined, and the lady's chamber pot emptied, and it does not care if your hands bleed, or your feet split, or your chest rattles with every breath. All that matters is that the task is done. And if you can't do it, someone else will, because there are always more peasants, more children, more desperate souls willing to trade their bodies for a sliver of shelter and a mouthful of stale gruel. So you do not rest. You do not heal. You endure until your vision blurs and your knees give and your lungs drown and your heart stops. And when you die, there is no marker, no grave, no name carved into stone, just a shallow pit behind the stables and a sigh of relief from the steward, who now has one less mouth to feed and one less body to punish. And the castle keeps breathing, its cold breath, its dark silence, its endless hunger. And you are forgotten, because that is what it means to be a servant in a medieval castle, to work until the body breaks, and then keep going. You are born, and before you speak your first word, before you walk, before you know what the sun feels like on your face, your life is already written. Not in books, not in laws, but in silence, in chains, in the air itself. You are not born free. You are not born important. You are not even born lucky. You are born as something that will be used, scraped hollow, and discarded. Your breath is borrowed. Your time is owned. Your identity is erased and replaced with function and obedience and silence. Because in a medieval castle you are not a person. You are a tool. And every part of you is just another gear in the great machine that feeds the noble's comfort. And every breath you take is a quiet debt owed to those who wear velvet and silk and gold, while you wear the same tunic for 6 years until it rots off your body. And you still wear it anyway. And if you think for one moment that your thoughts, your voice, your dreams matter, then you are already in danger. Because thinking is not allowed. Dreaming is dangerous. And speaking is fatal unless someone speaks to you first. And even then, your answer must be measured, polite, quiet, subservient. You do not look them in the eye, not because you are shy, but because your eyes are not worthy of meeting theirs. And if you forget, if your gaze lingers too long, it is seen as insolence, or challenge, or sin, and the punishment will be swift and cruel and unforgettable. Your clothes are not yours. They are given to you, and they are never new. They are the patched remains of other servants who have died or disappeared or been thrown into the moat. Your shoes, if you have any, are so thin the stones beneath your feet feel like knives. Your bed is straw, soaked in mold and sweat. Your room is a corner or a floor or a space beside the kitchen where rats fight for warmth with your own body. And you cannot leave because there is nowhere to go. You cannot rest because there is always more work. You cannot cry because tears make noise, and noise draws attention, and attention is the one thing you must avoid at all costs, because when they see you, truly see you, they remember you are human, and remembering that means they must do something about it, and they will not, so they do not. You are made to forget that you once had a name. You are now boy or girl, or you, or servant, or scum. You are made to forget that there is a world beyond the walls of the castle, because that world does not want you. And even if it did, you would never find it. You do not get days off. You do not get second chances. You do not get apologies or explanations or kindnesses. You get commands and glares and slaps and punishment. You get long days and longer nights. You get meals made of crusts and scraps and slop. You get the cold, the heat, the pain, the blisters, the burns, the bruises, the backaches, the cracked skin, the swollen feet, the infections, the sores, the silence. You get forgotten. Your future is not yours to build, because you do not have one. You are not permitted to imagine a better life, because that imagining would make you question the one you have. And questioning leads to resistance, and resistance leads to punishment, or exile, or death. Hope is a liability. It is a spark in a haystack, a flare in a mine. It is the thing they fear most in you, and the thing they crush first. They do it with words, and rules, and silence, and hunger. They do it with the way they look past you, as if you're not there. with the way they never use your name, with the way they laugh while you serve, with the way they punish you for flinching. They kill the hope and plant obedience in its place. They give you just enough to survive, and not a drop more. They keep you tired and hungry and afraid. Because tired people do not rise, hungry people do not rebel, afraid people do not run, and some do run. They slip into the woods under cover of night, chased by the dogs, by the guards, by the fear in their own lungs, and some are caught and dragged back, their feet torn, their clothes ripped, their bodies broken and paraded as examples. And some are never caught, because they do not make it far. They starve, or freeze, or fall, or are taken by other monsters on the road, and their bones are never found, and their names are never spoken again. And some end their lives quietly, with a stolen knife, or a frayed rope, or a handful of poisonous berries, not because they are weak, but because they are human, and a human can only take so much before the body is done, before the mind says, no more, and the heart simply stops fighting, and some stay, most stay, because they have nowhere else to go, because the castle is hell, but the world beyond it is a mystery, and a mystery is worse than a known nightmare, and so they wake every day and work until night, and sleep until morning, and serve without pause, or question, or hope. And the years pass, and their bodies shrink, and their backs bend, and their hair thins, and their eyes fade, and their names are lost, and they are still there, moving like shadows beneath the feet of the powerful. And when they die, they are not buried with prayer, or song, or stone. They are buried with garbage, or thrown in a pit, or simply left, and another servant takes their place. And the castle continues, and nothing changes, and no one remembers, because they were never meant to be remembered. They were meant to obey and fade and vanish, because they were not people. They were tools. And in the world of the medieval castle, that is the cruelest truth of all. Still think you'd thrive in a castle? Still picturing yourself strolling across a grand stone hall with sunlight filtering through stained glass, music from lutes in the background, and the smell of fresh bread in the air? Still think you'd rise through the ranks, win over the lady of the manor with your wit? Maybe earn a title from your bravery? Let's bring you back to reality. Because all of that, the stained glass, the music, the bread, it's not for you. You don't get to walk through the hall, you clean it. You don't eat the bread, you carry it. And you don't get to play the music. You're too busy carrying the instruments. What you walk through every day isn't a palace, it's a gilded prison, and you are the living fuel that keeps it burning. Imagine it. No, really. Don't just hear it. Imagine it. Your eyes snap open before the sun rises. You've slept 3 hours on mouldy straw. Your fingers are numb. Your back is already on fire before you've even lifted anything. You've been coughing for weeks. Something rattles in your chest. It might be the plague. It might be just smoke from yesterday's fire. No one will diagnose it. No one will treat it. You get up. You move. You don't speak. You start the fires. Your fingers split as you drag wet logs through the freezing courtyard. You light them anyway. You serve food you haven't eaten. You smile and bow while your stomach screams and your legs threaten to buckle. The noble child throws hot porridge in your face because it's too cold. You flinch. You say thank you. You clean it up. You burn your arm on the pot. You clean that too. Now go wash the blood from the master's hunting knives. Carry the chamber pot. Scrub the floors on your knees. Pull the lice from your mistress's hair. Stand in the snow until she's done screaming at you for folding her linen the wrong way. Do all this while your ribs are broken because the steward kicked you down the stairs 3 days ago. Do it while your gums bleed, while your skin is infected, while the last of your teeth aches so badly it feels like your entire skull might crack. Do it while the rot in your jaw spreads toward your brain. You know it is. You can feel it. But it doesn't matter. You have work to do. Could you carry chamber pots with a cracked spine? Could you hold a smile while your master spits in your face? Could you stay silent when the guard drags your friend into the stables and she comes back with bruises and broken eyes and nothing in her stare? Could you keep your mouth shut when your mistress calls you an animal? When your bedmate dies of fever beside you, and you still have to turn the spit the next morning like nothing happened? Could you watch your hands split open from cold and soap and still wipe down the stone steps before anyone notices the dust? Could you watch yourself disappear in the reflection of the kitchen pot until you are nothing but a shadow that moves when summoned and vanishes when ignored? That is the life. That is the castle. That is the truth behind the glamour. Behind the tapestries and the torches and the noble titles is a dark, rotting machine built on the backs of people who had no choice and no voice and no escape. This is what being a servant really meant. Not glory, not adventure, not a foot in the door. It meant survival at the lowest cost and even lower hope. And here's the worst part. It didn't matter how hard you worked. There was no reward, no freedom, no happy ending. You didn't rise through the ranks. You didn't earn their favor. You didn't become anything except exhausted. You died the way you lived, invisible, cold, used. So still think you'd make it? Still think you'd laugh off the hardship? Still think you'd be the exception? Because no one was. They broke everyone, eventually. And if you're still here, still listening, then maybe, just maybe, you understand what castle life really was. Not for kings, not for queens, for the forgotten, the silenced, the broken. So hit subscribe, hit like, because next time we'll show you what happened to the ones who tried to escape. The ones who ran through the forest with shackles on their feet and hope in their lungs. Spoiler, it didn't end well. And after that, monastic slavery, when holy vows hid unholy lives, or the real plague doctors, what they saw, what they smelled, what they couldn't unsee. Or maybe we'll dive into the kitchen boy's hell, the endless fire, the blisters, the punishments that turned children into smoke-burned ghosts before they even hit 14. This world wasn't made for the strong. It was made to grind the strong down into dust, and that dust still lingers in the cracks of every castle stone. You just didn't notice it before, but now you do.